Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. One of the things that's most out of character for me is buying a considerable number of books. In the last several years, I've really taken great pains and made efforts not to purchase books unless I honestly think I'm going to read them, or I need extra copies of something to lend out to my friends. So it's unusual that this year alone, and perhaps the end of last year as well, I've purchased so many more books than I really expected to. However, it's always different when it comes to the library book sale. We have one of the largest library book sales in our region, and over the course of 2 days, I went twice to this particular one. I spent exactly $20 and wound up with a number of things that you'll see here today, plus 2 puzzles and a number of books that I won't show you in this video because they will wind up being gifts. But there was a lot happening there, and I have a lot subsequently to share. So here are 10 books that somehow came home with me. Firstly, a historical romance novel called Too Scot to Handle by Grace Burrows. With a name like this, for someone who lived in Scotland for the length of time I did, this is a no-brainer. This is in what is always a very large section of 25-cent mysteries, so this one book for a quarter, 100% worth it to me. This is obviously just a romance novel that is set in Scotland. They all kind of have that attitude to them, right? It's the woman on the front, the rough approximation of some guy who's from Scotland and her who happens to be English. So be interesting to give this a read and compare it to all the other ones that I've read. I almost exclusively, if I'm gonna read a romance novel that is like a hard, firmly true romance novel like this, if I'm gonna do that, I'll almost always read one that's set in Scotland, because why not? I love to see how stereotypical it can become and how faithful to the country and the time period the author chooses to be. So I have plans to lend this around to a number of my friends because it's hysterical. Shortly after I read it. Sticking with the Scotland theme, this next book is set in Aberdeen. This is Tony Hogan Bought Me an Ice Cream Float Before He Stole My Ma by Carrie Hudson. And this is a book about Thatcherite Britain, so the UK in the 1980s, and it is a family drama and the story of this one young woman's mother who unfortunately winds up in a domestic violence shelter, and the story of their life from there. But it's quite short, honestly. It's like 250 pages or something like that, and I do love a family drama. It's apparently rather poignantly funny and has also been shortlisted for the Guardian Prize for First Fiction. So that'll be interesting too. As soon as I saw that this was set in Aberdeen, I was like, no matter what it's about, it's probably going to come home with me. I also really like a really long title like this, so the title takes up most of the cover in this instance, and it's more than 6 words. So well done on drawing the eye and the reader in with a front cover. Next is a book that is really rather a classic, not classic in the Greek sense of the classics, but a true piece that transcends time. Let's go with that. And that is Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence. So Edith Wharton is a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and it is this book that won her such prize. And this is a portrait of the New York high society in the 1920s and them, summering in other country places and living deeply in New York City, and during a time that the back of the book says when society people dreaded scandal more than they dreaded disease, which I think probably is something that's still pervasive in today's modern society. This isn't much of a cover exactly, but it's the copy that I could find. I have been told recently by a number of folks that I really need to read this book, especially considering that I live in Massachusetts and Edith Wharton spent her summers in Massachusetts, so there you go. And keeping with the theme of a family drama is this book called Family Trust by Kathy Wong. And this really fits into what I'm sensing as a theme that I've been reading lately of Asian American families and family dramas that are specifically connected to money. So this is not the first one that I have read. The Wangs versus the World I read recently for book club within the last year or so. I would even put Counterfeit in there, but there seem to be a lot of family dramas that involve money and Asian American, in this case, Chinese American immigrants. So this is the story of a family who is unhappy with their fortune and the sort of long journey that they go through to figure out how they're going to rectify that. It also just has an exceptionally delightful cover with all of the family members there and the money flowing freely from this person's hands there on top of the M. NPR calls this book a study in a difference between expectations and reality, something I think we could probably all spend a bit more time studying. So I will get to this eventually, but once I do, I'm sure it will be good. So this next book, called By the Book by Julia Sunborn, is really, to me, fitting into that type of contemporary fiction that is books about books for people who like books that are meant to be read in book groups. It seems to be a little bit of a subgenre happening, and I honestly only picked this book up because on the back it says, By the Book is an ode to bookish girls everywhere and the men who love them. And so by dint of just using the word bookish, and if you look at the name of our channel, that was the reason that I purchased this. This is about an English professor at a university in California, and how I think she falls in love with somebody else who works at the university. I'm pretty sure that it's the president of the university, and how that happens and comes about, and whether or not it's okay, etc., etc. By the Book seems to, the title there, indicate that there will A, be books involved because she's an English professor, but B, there might be rules that need to get followed and or broken. So I'm not going into this with particularly high expectations, although it was called Utterly Charming and a Complete Delight by Alexander McCall Smith, who, if you've watched us for a while, you know that I've read quite a bit of his work. So we'll see. I expect this to kind of be like warm and cozy and fun, but not particularly literary. Now, The Case of the Love Commandos by Tarquin Hall is going to be an interesting one. This is kind of a modern day Romeo and Juliet book that is set in India and is written by a person who has lived in India for quite some time, but is not of Indian descent, as far as my research has told me. So I'm going to be interested to see how this person writes from that perspective, because it is a Vishpuri novel, and if you can't really see it very well here, but the image of the person in the back there where it says whose novel this is does look to be an Indian man. So I'll be interested to see how this turns out, considering that it's being written by someone from a life experience that they don't have. But like I said, this is a modern day retelling of Romeo and Juliet. Essentially, there are two individuals from two very different castes who are in love with each other and want to get married. That doesn't fly with their families. One of them goes missing, and this man, Vishpuri, is the person who is called as the detective to try and come and find that person. I do love a mystery novel. I'm more and more interested recently in books that are set in India, so I hope that this will be good. I'm kind of reading it with a little bit of a skeptical eye, much as the same way I would read Alexander McCall Smith's The Number One Ladies Detective Agencies with a skeptical eye, because often in there I think he's writing from a perspective that he doesn't have lived experience with. So that's a little bit questionable, but we'll see how this goes. Also, I really enjoyed the cover here, sort of with the, I don't know if those are lighthouses or not, but I liked the way that all of the words, or I'm sorry, all of the letters in the word love wound up kind of looking like either buildings or places for those little birds to land. Now this book, Once in a Blue Moon Lodge by Lorna Landvik, perhaps Landvik, who's to say, probably her. I'm not really sure why I bought this. I think at its core, I saw that it was published by the University of Minnesota Press. It is set in Minnesota. It's also set in Norway. And on some level, I think it connected in my brain to Rose Nyland from The Golden Girls. And it says that it is a rollicking good time with characters whose strengths, foibles, and choices will have you laughing and crying, which is essentially all of Rose Nyland in Golden Girls. So there's a very limited amount of detail on the back. It's probably just going to take place again with a family drama, or just kind of like a group of people at this lodge in Minnesota, or perhaps in Norway, or perhaps even both. We'll see. It might bounce back and forth. I would guess that it will bounce back and forth. I didn't have a sincere interest in this book, but I did want it because I love the Golden Girls. And later this year when I do some traveling, this might be good to have with me. It feels like a good airplane book. Now, these next two books I don't think I ever would have picked up if my partner wasn't a very, very knowledgeable person about medieval history and ancient Rome and the Anglo-Saxons and all of this stuff from the past. And so I found these two books. One is The Law of Angels and the other is A Parliament of Spies, both by a woman called Cassandra Clark. Publishers Weekly over here at the top of this book says, "Medievalists rejoice." And so these are both about a woman who was a nun in like the 1350s, back in medieval times, probably in Europe, perhaps in the UK, who's to say? And I guess she just kind of gets asked to solve some mysteries. They both have pretty generic situations happening. I just noticed that there's a drop of blood hanging from the L on The Law of Angels. Surely there will be murder and mayhem to come being solved by a nun in medieval times. I can't wait to read passages of these aloud and find out how true to the time period they actually are. Now this book, The Perfume Thief by Timothy Shafhert, I am still considering whether or not I want to give this as a gift. I can't decide yet, but for the moment I feel like I need to keep it. This is about a queer American expat on the eve of World War II when the Nazis invade Paris. Wait, didn't World War II start in 1939 with the German invasion of Poland? Yes, but this is what the book flap reads. A gentleman in Moscow meets Moulin Rouge in this stylish, sexy page-turner about Clementine, a queer American expat and notorious thief of rare scents, who is drawn out of retirement and into one last scam when the Nazis invade Paris on the eve of World War II. So here we are. Bear with me. I know it really began in 1939. And how she is a retired con artist and she is talked into coming out of retirement to like pull one more scheme before she really properly retires, and it's all happening on the precipice of the Second World War. And I just think that that's such an interesting setup. I also want to see how they deal with having a queer character in that time period, considering if you've ever seen the musical Cabaret, either the movie or the stage production itself. You learn a lot in that about how queer people were treated back in that time period. This will be interesting, and I did just see Cabaret, so that idea is really stuck in my head. Also, what happens when a con artist retires? Like, what does that look like? I don't know. How do you know when you can retire if you're a con artist? I guess is it just like you don't enjoy pulling cons on people anymore? How do you make that choice? There's not like a retirement age in that industry. So I'm interested to see what retirement, as it's called, looks like for this particular character. And that's it. 10 books that I got at the library. 10 books plus some more, plus 2 puzzles for $20. Can't go wrong there. All of them are in pretty exceptional condition, and I think at some point they'll work their way into my life, but who knows when. Maybe they'll sit on my shelf for the next few years, like so many of these friends have. If you've read any of the books that I've described and want to share what you think of them, please do go ahead and leave a comment. Anything that you might want to know about us is, of course, in the description. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you very soon.